So there's quite the community when it comes to Resident Evil fan games. Let's take a look at a bunch of them. Most of these will be based off the original two titles, but there are some other surprises in store. It's nice that Capcom is quite lenient when it comes to fan games, especially in comparison to Nintendo. Now, by all means, this isn't the complete collection of Resident Evil fan games. Feel free to drop some comments of ones below that I end up missing. Maybe if I collect enough, I'll do another video on them, or even stream them. I'll have links as well in the description, so if you want to go check out these games, they will be available for you. Nice thing is that most of these are standalone without any additional tinkering, although there are a few that require a little bit more work, but are still quite easy to follow along. These are all on PC, save for one in which you'll need a PS1 emulator to get running. One thing to note is the resolution for most of these was quite different. Sometimes shadow play wouldn't play nicely when it came to recording this footage, so there are going to be some different resolution sizes for the video itself. So let's hop in, my boulder punching friends, and look at the world of Resident Evil fan games. Starting off with Ada's mod, Aidan Watkins, creator that's going to pop up a number of times throughout this video. And by the name, it should be obvious what this fan game is about, as Ada will be escaping the arcade lab that was mentioned in John's diary in the original game. This mod is just focused on the lab section. I'm only really familiar with the 2002 remake, so it was interesting to play through this with the variations in the level design, and how the mod also tweaks that further. I do love how getting the code right on the computer gives the finger guns, along with pounding your desk if it's wrong. This is quite a short mod compared to the other ones I'll be featuring on this list, but it's well worth a play. Nice to expand on an area of Resident Evil lore that fits within the story, and hey, it's always nice to be playing as Ada. Have you ever wondered what it'd be like to play Barry in the OG Resident Evil? Well, Barry's mod, that's what you could do. What happens when you pick a new game or load?
Jibble sandwich.
We'll also get a start with Barry's Magnum as well, which can have some nice strategies since it wrecks anything it touches. Sadly, there isn't an issue here where Jill doesn't save him from becoming a berry burger or berry sandwich, whatever you want to call it. Again, it's probably more due to the engine's limitations on that front. Plus, the models make use of the 2002 outfits from the OG. There are changes to where items are located and enemies are located, so we'll have a different path that we'll go through compared to the original. Granted, I don't have a ton of experience with the 1996 version, so this is a nice surprise to have the changes up, even more considering all the differences between this and the remake. There's also Jill's extended scenario. This fan game doesn't fuck around. This one is a lot less polished compared to the other fan games that will be featured on here. But if you're looking at a challenge of the original Jill campaign, this one will test you. Way more enemies, maybe too many. It's really easy to get caught in that zombie grab loop. Next up is Gelzer mod, which is still a work in progress. This fan game makes use of Gelzer and Dewey. Both characters were cut from the original game. Again, this one's still work in progress, so we don't have any access to it as of yet. Footage I have here is from a streamer who had a copy of it. Provide a link for that for you to check out. What about Demakes for Resident Evil? Well, we have a few of those. And the Bootleg. There's a Chinese bootleg that's made by Weiqing Computer Science and Tech Co. for the Famicom. It's actually a pretty fascinating world when it comes to Chinese bootlegs of various games. There's a Famicom version of Final Fantasy VII. This is more or less the original game intact, but made for the Famicom, and holy crap, that music is annoying. It's just as bad as listening to Cardi B. The interesting thing, though, is battles are like Resident Evil Gaiden. Another demake is a RPG Maker version of the game. Looking at some of the comments, I did learn that there's a number of assets here that come from Sweet Home, one of the spiritual predecessors to Resident Evil. This one, unlike the previous demake, doesn't have a Gaiden mode, but instead you just shoot from wherever. Another one that's in progress is the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive version. There's currently a demo you can try out, but it's very bare bones of what you can do with it. But what they've shown so far otherwise looks really cool. And how about playing Resident Evil in the style of Game Boy Color? There was actually an unfurnished version that was being worked on for Resident Evil on Game Boy Color. However, one modder decided to run with this idea. And no, this isn't something you play on a Game Boy emulator. You have to make use of the Rebirth patch with Resident Evil to play. So if you want to try for that Game Boy style, this is the best way to try it out. It's still a work in progress, but shows great promise. In fact, right now, you don't need to worry about ink ribbons, which is interesting. Ever wonder what Resident Evil would be like if you played it with an over-the-shoulder view? Well, short of Capcom remaking the original, I wouldn't put it past them. The best way to do so is through Resident Evil Remix. This version makes use of the Resident Evil 4 engine to give us the over-the-shoulder view. Now, this currently isn't available yet for the public, although channels like Residents of Evil did do some playthroughs of earlier versions of it, but it looks really fascinating. It's always interesting to see what people will do with these games in different styles, so I really look forward to giving this one a try one day. That note of different perspectives, if you ever wondered what Resident Evil 1 would be like in the style of Resident Evil 7, well, there's a fan game for that with Resident Evil RE7 Make. Still being worked on, it's pretty simple so far. It lacks a bit of the oomph and feedback that gets from getting hit by enemies or when you hit enemies, but it's interesting to see the differences. The Mercenaries mode was surprisingly fun. One of the more interesting what-ifs in gaming history is the original version of Resident Evil 2 that was scrapped, known as Resident Evil 1.5. A lot of work was done prior to starting from scratch into the version we got in 1998. Fans wouldn't let Resident Evil 1.5 die, and eventually would get their hands on a build of the game. The excellent channel Wang has a fantastic video breaking down the history of Resident Evil 1.5, the journey the game took to land in modders' hands. Since then, a group of individuals have been poking away at the game. The footage you see here is from my stream in October 2020. Since then, the game has received a number of updates. Playing Resident Evil 1.5, even if unfinished, feels like stepping into an alternate reality, where this version was released instead of the 1998 release. This version will require to make use of a PlayStation emulator to play, unlike the other games that we have covered here. So if you want a taste of forbidden fruit, this one is a must-play, even with clip wings. Do note, this isn't the only Resident Evil 1.5 project. A new project that has emerged is Resident Evil Back to Origins. It's a reimagining of the 1.5 prototype, something akin to Resident Evil Remake from 2002. Don't expect this one until 2022 or maybe 2023, but keep it on your radar. Requiem of Spies. This is the fan game that helped pioneer the Resident Evil modding scene, released all the way back in 2002. This saw a re-release a few months ago from our good pal Aiden Watkins to get running on modern systems. This game will have us playing as everyone's favorite RPD basketball star, Rebecca Chambers. Something that I haven't mentioned yet in this video is that unless they're using voice files from the original, the cutscenes in these fan games will use text. Requiem of Spies is an exception. Let's take a listen.
Stop. Who are you and what you doing here?
Wait, I'm a STARS officer.
Rebecca Chambers? Oh, sorry about that, Rebecca. I can't believe it. You were right. You and the stars, Umbrella, it was all true.
Are there?
I don't know. The zombies are everywhere. We lost a whole SWAT team in the first attack, and there's something else here.
I'm fairly certain that's the same person doing all the voices. Well, it's fitting for the series in a sense. Of all the fan games I played for Resident Evil Destiny was probably my least favorite, both from gameplay and a technical standpoint. Pretty much all these fan games have the option for the 180 quick turn, save for Destiny. There's a point earlier on that you have to collect a key. Thing is, there is no indication I need to pick it up from a downed enemy. There's no glowing item. The game crashed when I blasted a shotgun to the face of an enemy, and the game didn't register my save when I reloaded. Still, I want to make note of it, because even the short time I did have with it, it was otherwise enjoyable. Resident Evil 2's Survivors mod is a bit of an odd mishmash, taking the world of Resident Evil 2 and putting it in the engine of Resident Evil 4. We'll be able to jump back and forth between fixed camera and over the shoulder. This game mostly consists of a Mercenaries mode, one combining fixed angle and over the shoulder, while the others are just over the shoulder. It did make me laugh that playing as Claire, she has a very weak melee kick. Come on girl, your brother can punch boulders. Another fan game from Aiden Watkins, and with the name, it shouldn't come as a surprise that we'll be controlling Marvin, just prior to what happens to him in Resident Evil 2. This fan game makes use of characters and cutscenes from the Resident Evil Outbreak games. For a time, we will have a partner, Rita, join us on our excursions. There are some odd aspects where she'll appear on the other side of where we enter a room, likes to get stuck, usually won't shoot unless enemies are in her face. Granted, I'm chalking this one up to engine limitations. It's a nice little excursion through the RPD with a different critical path and some changes to keep you guessing in familiar territory. Of all the fan games that have full releases, I would argue that Mortal Night is the most expansive and ambitious, with 3 episodes and a prologue. While the other fan games on this list do throw challenges at us, Mortal Night really bumps up the difficulty and is for the hardcore Resident Evil fans. There are some elements of randomization here. In episode 1, for example, I ended up at a spot with 3 liquors and next to no ammo on hand. This is no short jaunt. This could easily take a handful of hours to go through this entire fan game. It's really incredible to see what people are able to do with this game engine, and what they add to the base game. We'll be jumping back and forth between characters in these episodes. I want to give major props to the composer for Mortal Night. Some of these tracks are incredible additions that fit right in. So if you want some RE2 with some major changes in hardcore difficulty, check out Mortal Night. While working on this video, the team who put out Mortal Night released a demo for their upcoming fan game, During the Storm. During the Storm looks to eclipse Mortal Night in regards to its scope and its ambition. Ever wonder what Raccoon City would be like prior to the accident? Well, you can in During the Storm, even if it's just a brief period of time. We'll start the game as Kevin from Resident Evil Outbreak, and we'll have choices of what we want to do akin to Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and we'll branch out accordingly. On that note, depending on our choices, we could run to everyone's favorite loose cannon super cop, Jill Valentine, plus Elsa Walker from Resident Evil 1.5. I went through the branching paths with this demo and was very impressed with what they've done so far. I can't wait to see the full release. They mentioned that the full release will be open world, but more in the style of Dark Souls. You'll be able to pick up side quests, enemies will follow you through various rooms, there will be an internal timer akin to Dead Rising. How this will work, we'll have to wait to see in the full release. This is slated to come out later this year in 2021, but you know how things can be with fan projects, but do keep an eye on it regardless. Of course, I can't talk about fan games for Resident Evil 2 without mentioning Resident Evil 2 Reborn. Of all the games covered on this list, this is the only one to my knowledge that received a cease and desist from Capcom. A team in Italy was remaking Resident Evil 2 from scratch using the Unreal Engine, but was told to shut down by Capcom in 2015. However, the team was invited to check out Capcom's work on RE2 prior to its announcement, taught game development, and were even the credits for Resident Evil 2 Remake. The team would go on to make Daymare 1998, and even had ex-Capcom staff join their team. See, Nintendo? There is a good way to go about these things.
I came to thank you for your great service to this country. As a token of my gratitude, I'd like to give you the N-word pass.
When it comes to fan games taking the comedy approach, it can be a real hit or miss. Luckily, RPD Simulator more or less knocks it out of the park with its humor. I can't remember how the hell I stumbled across this one, maybe a Resident Evil thread on 4chan, but I'm sure glad I did. Yes, this game makes plenty use of continuing the Redfield bloodline.
Leon! There's no time! You need to fuck my sister! Give me an egg. Hurry!
There's a number of endings that we could get here depending on what we do, some fairly straightforward, some requiring a bit more work. Getting all the girls to chase down Leon with Claire jumping up and down never ceases to crack me up. Some of the meme humor here can fall a bit flat or feel a bit dated, but otherwise, RPD Simulator makes a great little chuckle and a fun little play.
Someone at work ate my sandwich. My Thanksgiving leftover sandwich. I can't believe someone just ate it.
Besides some HD upscales, there did seem to be a whole lot when it came to fan games with Resident Evil 3, but I did find some. Just before recording, I did come across a fan build making use of the Unreal Engine, in which you could switch back and forth between fixed camera and over the shoulder. The goal of this version is to be much more faithful to the original in comparison to what we got with Resident Evil 3 Remake. There's no indication of when this will be finished, but do keep an eye on it. And just as I was about to wrap everything up here and start recording, I came across another one on Twitter, the Resident Evil 3 overhaul mod, The Lord of the Necropolis. This pulls some elements of the RE3 remake, like having Jill's outfit in this game, but also a whole batch of other changes. One interesting addition is hide and seek with Nemesis, where we could hide from Nemi and hope that he doesn't catch us. This is set to launch in April 2021, so keep an eye on it if you're into Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. One that I nearly missed when doing research for this video was Resident Evil Crossfire. I'm really glad I came across it. There's blogs for this going back as far as 2010, and it looks like a beta was released at some point in 2015, the most recent update a couple years ago. This takes place after the events of Resident Evil 2 and 3 in November 1998, with new characters and new environments. If you're looking for a fan game with new environments as opposed to mixing up familiar ones, give Resident Evil Crossfire a shot. Most of our time will be in a church, in which we get into that classic Resident Evil loop, dealing with enemies, solving puzzles, opening up shortcuts, resource management. 3DUU, the creator, has a solid understanding of how these work so well. If you told me this was cut content or a cancelled Resident Evil prototype, could have fooled me. Like Resident Evil 1.5, another major what if was the various iterations of Resident Evil 4 that were worked on prior to the release version. One of these versions, known as Hookman, shown to E3 2003, captivated audiences. So while there was less to go on compared to Resident Evil 1.5, dedicated fans put together their own versions of Resident Evil 3.5. One of them being the Madman version, which you can currently play, makes use of the Unity engine. It runs great, it's super short, but has really great tension, and it's too bad we never got to see a full release of it. However, we are seeing Resident Evil 3.5 further fleshed out with Resident Evil 3.5 Revival, the same team who worked on Resident Evil Survivor. It's hard to say right now how much this one will contain, how long it will be, but something to be aware of and keep your eye on. Ever wonder what Resident Evil 2 would be like using the Source engine? Well, someone with the username Bloodwrath put that together. Everything is more or less here, including the puzzles, with Half-Life 2 enemies in place instead. It's pretty easy to play, wide hallways make it easy to avoid enemies, and they go down fast, but it's more about a showcase of the game in the engine than being bounced for it. It's interesting to have this mashup with Source engine sound effects mixed in as well with Resident Evil. Oh, and what happens with the alligator section? Great stuff. Resident Evil isn't the only iconic franchise turning 25 this year. 1996 saw the world introduced to Lara Croft and Tomb Raider. The classic-style Tomb Raiders have quite the fan community when it comes to fan missions, and some fans have made levels set in the world of Resident Evil. One fan mission has us running around as Jill in the mansion. Another which just recently saw release was one for Resident Evil 2 starring as Claire. While the mansion level is more small in scale, this one has gone quite a bit all out, and what I thought would be just a short session of a few minutes capturing footage turned into about an hour-long session. I was an N64 kid growing up, so I didn't get tons of Tomb Raider time unless at friends' houses. I never truly mastered the learning curve of how the game controls, but it was really fun to see the creativity and how people mesh these worlds together. Finally, I can't talk about fan creations without mentioning Doom mods. Doom has one of the most extensive fan communities in regards to fan creation, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's been some Doom and Resident Evil crossover. Yes, fans have made the mission within the Doom engine, so if you want to see what that would be like and blast some demons in it, this WOD is for you. And finally, we have Codename Hunk. It's hard to believe that this was put together on the Doom engine. Again, showing what communities can do when you're allowed to see under the hood. God bless you, John Carmack. We have the option to play as Hunk or Krauser in the style of Resident Evil 4 over the shoulder with QTE dodges and melee kills. And of course, great voice acting with various quality mics. At the very least, give this one a try in case you haven't played around with Doom in a while. It's something that you should always have on hand and installed.
All they want is results, and that's what I provide, for the right price.
You'll get a substantial reward if you meet our expectations.
And with that, we have a Cole's Notes version of the world of Resident Evil fan games. Happy 25th anniversary, Resident Evil. Again, if there's any I missed, feel free to leave a comment below, and if I gather enough, I might do another video, perhaps do a stream, the very least. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, you know, the whole shebang. Thank you to current patrons, and if you are interested, check out my Patreon below in the description. Look forward to seeing you taffers around. Boulder Punch out.